The morning came in gray and cold, the way mornings do when something is about to end. Fog clung to the ridgeline like it didn't want to witness what was happening below. The valley was still, unnaturally still, the kind of quiet that settles over a place when the animals sense trouble before the people do. Crows lined the fence posts along Route 9 like black-robed judges. The old oak at the property's edge stood bare, its arms reaching upward as if pleading with a sky that had long stopped listening. The auction was set for 8 o'clock. By 7:45, a crowd had already gathered in the packed dirt in front of the Aldridge property. Men in heavy coats, boots caked with red clay, faces carefully blank. Nobody looked at the woman standing on the porch steps. That was deliberate. Looking meant choosing a side, and in Harden County, choosing a side against Sheriff Dale Pruitt had consequences that outlasted the choosing. Clara Aldridge stood straight. That was the only thing she had left to control, the straightness of her spine. She had been born on this land. 39 years ago, her mother had labored through a July night in the back bedroom, while her father paced the porch and prayed to a God he only visited in emergencies. The house had belonged to her grandparents before that, built board by board from timber cut on this same hillside, chinked with river clay, raised by hands that had bled for it. 3 generations of Aldridges had buried their dead in the small plot behind the eastern tree line, marked with fieldstones because they never had money for proper headstones. Thomas was there now, her husband of 11 years. He died 14 months ago, a cardiac event, the doctor said, as if calling it something clinical made it smaller, more manageable. It hadn't been manageable. The farm had been already struggling when he died. 2 dry summers, a sick herd, equipment that kept breaking in ways they couldn't afford to fix. Thomas had carried the weight of it quietly, the way men of his generation were taught to, and when he died he took with him the knowledge of just how bad things had gotten. Clara had found the debt notices in a coffee can in the barn. $41,000. Loans she hadn't known existed, signed against the deed of the land itself. Sheriff Pruitt had shown up 3 weeks later with paperwork. He'd been almost gentle about it, which was the cruelest part. He sat at her kitchen table and explained the county foreclosure process in the tone of a man delivering unfortunate weather news. The land would go to auction. The proceeds would settle the debt. Whatever remained, if anything remained, would come to her. She'd asked how much the land would sell for. He'd looked at his hands. She understood then. The sale price had already been decided. The auction was theater. "We'll start the bidding at $10. Pruitt's voice carried across the yard with the ease of a man accustomed to filling silences. He stood behind a folding table with a county seal paperweight holding down a stack of documents, his deputy at his elbow, his expression professionally sorrowful. $10. For 40 acres of mountain land, a farmhouse, a barn, a well that had never once gone dry. Clara's jaw tightened. She watched the crowd. Not one face moved toward speech. These were her neighbors. Men she'd waved to on the highway, women who'd brought casseroles after Thomas died, families who'd traded labor with the Aldridges during harvest for 20 years. Every one of them stared at the ground. $10, Pruitt said again. "Do I have 10? A hand went up near the back. Tom Briley, who ran the feed store. He didn't look at Clara. 10. "Do I have 11? Silence. $11. "Anyone?" More silence. Heavy, deliberate, rehearsed silence. 12, Pruitt said, and Clara realized with nauseating clarity that he was bidding himself up, moving the number toward whatever minimum satisfied the legal requirement, boxing out any possibility of a real sale. $12. The land her family had bled for. $12 so it could pass quietly into the hands of whoever Pruitt had already promised it to. "Do I have 12? 12. Briley again, barely audible. The gavel rose. 13. The voice came from the far edge of the crowd, low, unhurried, carrying the specific weight of a voice that didn't use itself often. Heads turned. Clara turned. The man standing at the back was large in the way that mountains are large, not dramatic about it, just present, immovable. He wore a canvas work coat gone dark with age and use, boots that had seen serious terrain, a jaw covered in several weeks of dark beard shot through with early gray. He held no paperwork. He carried no expression she could read. His eyes, when they found hers across the crowd, were the color of river water in October. Deep and still and giving nothing away. $13, he said, as if he were confirming a fact rather than placing a bid. Pruitt stared at him. The man stared back. Something passed between them. Clara couldn't name it, but she felt it, the way you feel a change in pressure before a storm. $13, Pruitt repeated slowly. Going once. He paused. Going twice. Another pause long enough to be a threat. Sold. The gavel came down like a verdict. He arrived at the property 2 hours later with a truck so old it seemed to run on stubbornness alone. Clara was on the porch with her grandfather's shotgun across her knees when he pulled through the gate. She watched him park, watched him step out, watched him look at the land the way men look at things they're trying to understand rather than things they already own. He didn't swagger. He didn't survey. He just stood there for a moment, breathing it in. Then he reached into the truck bed and pulled out an axe. You need to stop walking, Clara said. He stopped. This is my land. Her voice didn't shake. She was proud of that. Was, he said, not unkind, just precise. I have a shotgun. I can see that. Then you understand my position. He looked at the woodpile near the barn, or what remained of it, which wasn't much. Then he looked at her. Wood's low, he said. Winter's not. He walked to the woodpile, set a log on the splitting stump, and swung the axe. Clara sat with the shotgun and watched him work and had absolutely no idea what to do with any of this. He didn't explain himself that first day or the second. He slept in his truck. He ate whatever he'd brought in a cooler. He worked, quietly, methodically, without being asked, repairing the fence along the north pasture where 3 posts had rotted through, patching the barn roof where the last windstorm had peeled back a section of tin. He didn't ask permission. He didn't seek approval. He simply moved through the property like a man completing tasks that needed completing, as if the work itself were the whole point. Clara watched him from windows, from doorways, from behind the pretense of other activities. His name was Eli. She learned that on the 3rd morning when she brought coffee to the porch and found him already there, sitting on the steps like he'd been waiting for the day to officially begin. She handed him a mug without speaking. Eli, he said, accepting it. Clara. They drank in silence. It should have been uncomfortable. Somehow it wasn't. That evening she cooked enough stew for 2 without deciding to. She left a bowl on the porch railing and went back inside. When she checked an hour later, it was gone. Small things. That's how walls come down. Not dramatically, not all at once, but through small things accumulated quietly over days. A borrowed tool returned with a note about its loose handle. A water bucket refilled before she noticed it was empty. The evening she came out to find him sitting with her dog, Mabel, who had refused to let anyone near her since Thomas died, lying with her gray head in his lap like she'd known him for years. Clara stood in the doorway and watched and felt something shift behind her sternum. Not warmth exactly, not yet, but the possibility of warmth. The memory of what it felt like to have someone in your corner. She was not ready to trust it, but she was no longer pointing a gun at it. They came on a Thursday morning, Pruitt and 2 men she didn't recognize, both with the particular blankness of hired professionals. Pruitt had a folder. Morning, Clara. He tipped his hat the way he always did, that practiced gesture of false courtesy. Need to speak to you about the property transfer. Eli stepped out of the barn. Pruitt's eyes moved to him. Something tightened in the sheriff's face. Not surprise exactly. Recognition. And underneath the recognition, something that looked very much like calculation. Mr. Cole, Pruitt said. Eli said nothing. There's a complication with the deed transfer, Pruitt continued, opening the folder. Turns out there's a secondary lien on the property. One that predates the foreclosure. Means the sale may not be legally binding. He paused. Which would return the debt burden to the original owner. His eyes moved back to Clara. You. Clara felt the ground shift beneath her. That's not possible, she said. The auction was county-sanctioned. The county made an administrative error, Pruitt said smoothly. These things happen. We'll need to discuss your options for settling the outstanding debt. He smiled. Unless, of course, you can demonstrate the lien is invalid. He knew she couldn't. The folder was theater, same as the auction. The lien was fabricated, she could feel it, but fabricated paperwork in Harden County had a way of becoming very real very fast, when the man fabricating it also controlled the courthouse records. Eli's voice came from behind her. I'd like to see that lien. What happened next was fast. Pruitt handed over the papers with the confidence of a man who has never been challenged by anyone who had the means to challenge back. Eli read them. His expression didn't change, which told Clara nothing and somehow told her everything. This lien is dated 4 years ago, Eli said. That's correct. Thomas Aldridge refinanced this property 3 years ago. New deed, clean title, recorded in county records. He reached into his coat and produced a document. Folded, worn at the creases, clearly carried for some time. This is a certified copy of that recording. The air went out of Pruitt's manufactured certainty. Where did you get that? Pruitt said. Not a question. Thomas gave it to me. Eli's voice was level. He was concerned someone might try this. One of the hired men took a step forward. Eli looked at him with the specific quality of stillness that precedes violence. Not threatening, just deeply, organically prepared, and the man stopped. You've got a falsified lien, Sheriff, Eli said. And I've got documentation that makes it provable. Now you can take your men and leave, or I can make some calls this afternoon that will be significantly less convenient for you. Pruitt stared at him for a long moment. Then he closed the folder. He left without tipping his hat. Clara waited until the truck was gone from sight before she turned to face him. You knew Thomas, she said. Eli folded the document carefully and held it out to her. We served together. 2 tours. He paused. He talked about this place every day we were overseas. The way morning looks on that ridge. The sound the creek makes in spring. The way you laugh when something catches you off guard. He stopped. He loved you the way some men love the thing that makes them understand why they're alive. Clara's throat had closed. He wrote me a letter before he died, Eli continued. Said the debts were bad. Said he was scared of what might happen after. He asked me, if something went wrong, if someone tried to take what was yours, to make sure they didn't. He looked at the land. The $13 wasn't about the land. It was about the promise. She was quiet for a long time. Wind moved through the bare oak at the property's edge. Why didn't you tell me? She said finally. Because you would have fought me, he said. Simply, truthfully. She almost laughed. I did fight you. Not as hard as you would have. The deed was re-recorded correctly the following week. A county attorney, not Pruitt's man, but a state-level appointee who'd received an anonymous tip about irregularities in Harden County's foreclosure records, processed the paperwork personally. The secondary lien was struck from the record. The land passed cleanly, legally, permanently back into Clara Aldridge's name. Pruitt resigned 2 weeks later, citing health reasons. Nobody in Harden County was surprised. Several people were quietly relieved. Winter came properly then. Heavy and white and clean, the kind that silences everything and forces a reckoning with what remains when all the noise is stripped away. Eli's truck was still in the yard. He'd asked, awkwardly, after the legal business was settled, whether the barn had insulation enough for the cold months. Clara had looked at him for a long moment, at this large, quiet, difficult man who had kept a promise to her dead husband across years and miles and considerable personal inconvenience, and told him the guest room had a decent mattress and she wasn't using the firewood for just one person. He'd nodded. That was all. On the first morning of December, Clara woke before dawn and came downstairs to find coffee already made and Eli on the porch, watching the dark ridge begin its slow transformation toward light. She poured herself a cup and stood beside him. They didn't speak. The fog was moving up from the valley, soft and white, and the bare oak at the field's edge had a dusting of frost on every branch that caught the first pale light and held it, brief and bright and extraordinarily fragile, before the sun climbed high enough to take it away. Clara breathed in cold air. She breathed out something she'd been holding for a long time. The land was hers. The morning was hers. And for the first time in longer than she could clearly remember, she did not feel the particular weight of being the only one standing in it.